Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where our purpose is to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve your organisation sustainably. Learn how to achieve and sustain an excellence journey for yourself, others, and the planet.
And I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. We are proudly brought to you in association with SA Partners, a world-leading business transformation consultancy. SA Partners are a truly purposeful company focused on helping organisations achieve sustainable improvement for themselves, others, and the planet. Welcome to episode 47 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. Many of you know my belief that excellence in sport is not far different to business. Today's guest has studied and proven this. It is such a pleasure to have Mr. James Curd, the author of Legacy, on the show with us today. Legacy, What the All Blacks Can Teach Us About the Business of Life, is one of the best books I've ever read. James is an author, speaker, and leadership expert who helps create high-performance cultures for elite teams and organizations. Let's get into the episode. James, thank you so much for joining us today.
Brad, total pleasure. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
And James, I'm really keen to understand your backstory. What's your backstory that led you into this space of writing a book about one of the greatest All Black teams of all times?
Well, I'm a Kiwi, and although I live in London now and have 30-something years, I will always call New Zealand home. And of course, the epitome of being a New Zealander really is the All Blacks. So clearly it was a lot of fascination from a young age about what makes this extraordinary outfit tick. My background beyond that is I actually started in advertising as a writer. And really there's a sort of a storytelling aspect to that, and the ability to kind of define a culture or define the essence of something or the purpose of something that came out of that, and my kind of work as a brand consultant and in culture change within larger organizations. And really I saw the connection, and my legacy really is a case study of a lot of that learning from many different domains, seen through the prism of an extraordinary team, maybe the world's most extraordinary team in terms of results, arguably, in some ways, inarguably, the most successful sporting outfit of all time. So, it's a kind of case study, a portrait of success, and how this particular group, which in many ways is the most successful era of the most successful team, really turned the ship around and made it rebooted around some fundamental cultural truths that helped it lift its game and lift a couple of World Cups.
Yeah, because James, the other thing that's interesting about when you wrote this book, it was written at that pivotal time, isn't it? Because the All Blacks, they had a challenging time leading up to this team.
They had a very challenging time. I was embedded for a month with the team in 2010. 2009, I think they lost every game they played against the Springboks, certainly. So they'd had a pretty rough time at that point. They were really rebooting, I think, at that point, aiming towards the 2011 World Cup. But even before that, they'd had some rocky times. 2007, they found themselves in the backseat of the cheap seats, the cheap seats of an Air New Zealand jet flying back to New Zealand, having been bundled out in the quarterfinal stages of the World Cup. And before that, again in 2004, when that management, if you like, had taken over, they were coming off the back of another world-class failure against the Wallabies. And it wasn't a culture that was in great shape. I think it was dominated by some strong individuals. They were starting to get the tag of chokers, the best team in the world between World Cups. So I was really interested in that process of how you take something that's intrinsically strong. Clearly even at 2004, they had the world's best sporting stat. That was about 75% of all encounters over about 110 years at that point, thereabouts. An incredible stat already, but not all was well. And the new management led by Graham Henry, the three wise men, or the gang of four, it's been called in different ways. This leadership group took a long, hard look at the culture and really looked to reboot it. And, you know, the results have spoken for themselves in terms of their approach and the way they did it. And what I saw were very clear parallels with great teams I'd seen in other domains.
Yeah.
So I wanted to somehow capture that and tell a great story. You know, it is a great story. I wanted to capture it in a storytelling style.
No, it was a highly enjoyable book, James. Like it was enjoyable for the read as much as it was for the knowledge and insight. But James, what was it that made you see similarities between sport and business and other arenas? Like, where did your initial thoughts on that come from?
Well, I think we were talking before the recording, you know, the more I look into the great teams or highly functioning teams, you know, I think the principles remain the same. They're wearing a different suit of clothes. The language may express it in a different way, but there's something almost anthropological, I think, about that human beings have kind of learned and evolved over time to understand what the criteria are to make great teams. You know, great teams are cohesive teams. They're coherent teams. They're mutually, they tend to have a flat hierarchy. You know, the British SAS talk about rank but no class.
Yeah.
They tend to be team first environments, or they are all team first environments. It's a contribution, like leaving the jersey in a better place is the All Blacks version of it. But if, you know, you take, I don't know, the Gurkhas, for instance, the Nepali fighting force, part of the British and other armies, they talk about Qaeda. And Qaeda really is legacy, is that idea of a lineage to which they contribute, to which they do their part with their time in the team. It's sort of upholding those traditions, if you like. Same idea, very, very different cultural context. Talking military examples again, the Navy SEALs, they, when their candidates finish their famous Hell Week, they're greeted by the oldest serving SEAL, who's known as the Frogman, or the Bullfrog, and so it's a passing of the baton again. Again, that idea of lineage is extraordinarily powerful, and that's just sort of one of the ideas. Other things around their learning environments, their places committed to getting better every day. They're values-based, vision-led, purpose-driven groups. You know, they know what they stand for and they know what they don't. They live those values out loud. They're focused on character and of doing, again, militarily, doing the right thing on a difficult day. They have clarity of vision. They know where they're going. And they've asked the deepest question of all, why? Why does it matter? You know, there's a purpose beyond results, I think. And a bunch of others. You know, they tend to be very authentic places. They tend to be places that have great psychological safety, in which I kind of say, in which the conversations that need to be had get had.
Yeah.
They are compassionate. They take care of each other. You know, no one gets left behind. Now, that's true of, you know, I've talked about military examples. That's true within the All Blacks. Let's say it's, you know, true within, I've had an opportunity to work with Leicester City and over the last couple of years, and the factors are exactly the same. And in terms of businesses, you know, a lot of businesses don't run like this. A lot of businesses are very transactional, very hierarchical, very kind of internecine squabbling that goes on, very factional, very political. They're the antithesis of what makes a great team. But within good businesses, most often the really great businesses, you know, culture is cellular. You know, it really clusters in small groups. You know, that warrior band, if you like, 30 odd people roughly.
Yeah.
You know, size of a sales department often, size of a, you know, the size of a small bit, you know, a small business, kind of that ambitious startup phase, or when it's really starting to kind of hit its straps. They tend to model the same great behavior. The successful ones tend to model the great behaviors. You know, when businesses get too big, or they scale, or they're run in a bad way, they tend to lose that way. And I'm really interested in, well, you know, if Stan McChrystal is right, and I think he is, in terms of defining businesses as, good businesses as teams of teams.
Yeah.
If you can impact one team and you can create a kind of a team culture that can be replicated through all the teams within an organization, you can help that larger organization really lift their game in every area. And, I've seen it done really well in some organizations. Some organizations are terrible at it.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in making a kind of better world of work, if you like, and trying to create a kind of an understanding of what great looks like, and isolate some of those principles that we can start to apply in our own leadership practice.
Yeah, it's a good cause, James. It's a good cause. Go to our website, enterpriseexcellencepodcast.com/downloads to gain additional insights from the pre-interview discussions with James Kerr. There is also an article on how to be an effective coach, which is relevant to the show. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast to help others gain insights and create a better future. Let's get back into the episode. And James, what you've described there really sounds to me like what you've discovered is a lot of ways that you can practically create a high performance culture. The word culture is bandied around so much as just a pass away word, but it sounds like you've really distilled it. And I saw that in the book. And James, is that what you saw and you wrote about in the All Blacks? There was this team that was, they were having moments that they weren't achieving what they wanted to achieve. They were still at 75% win rate, but I know from your book, they took it to 85. But what did you see in that transition? Like, what did you see?
Well, even higher, 95, I think it was, over the following decade,
Wow.
So they took the world's most successful team and they added 20% on top of that, or thereabouts. Depending how you do your maths, I think it's sort of 17.8% or something. But they put this incredible chunk. Now, in business, that'd be insider trading, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it illustrates the idea of what the military would call a force multiplier effect. It's like, in a way, that culture works really strongly to impact everything. And that human dimension, Napoleon said the moral to the physical is as 3-to-1. The human aspect of any enterprise, much more than your kind of physical assets. You can only make so many phone calls a day. You can only kind of knock on so many doors a day. It's the synergies between people, the cohesion, the clarity of effort, the focus, the resilience, the ability for good cultures to attract and retain talent, to stay up late and order in pizzas. All of those intangibles, all of those small marginal gains, if you like, act, when they're connected up, as a force multiplier, I think, and can create competitive advantage. Sorry, I've slightly gone off your question.
No, it's great, James. I think that's great content, because the one thing I wanted to ask you, and this is from a personal point, I enjoyed reading about every 15 elements that you put in that book, Legacy. I know you've got the second edition out, which adds more to it even. But what would you say, James, are 4 of the key points out of those 15 lessons that you wrote about within the All Blacks?
I almost describe it as a sort of graphic equalizer. It sort of depends on your needs. It depends what you're listening out for. You're going to turn a channel up. But I think in terms of the kind of the killer apps, if you like, Tom Peters famously said, leaders don't create followers, they create other leaders. And that leaders create leaders aspect, which is a phrase that's bandied around and I've used as sort of one of the aphorisms, if you like. The idea that everyone is a leader. Leadership happens at every level. I do a lot of work. I go, masterclass work, and I go into organizations, and one of the key questions is, hey guys, what's the leadership like around here? And there's two main responses to that. People either point up and shake their head at the same time, or they point to themselves. Metaphorically, or now that's in a way the two kinds of, it's either leadership happens somewhere else and everyone's a follower and actually it's blame upwards, or it's ownership, or it's on me. Now great cultures are highly accountable. in which everybody feels responsible for the result. And that's one way to define leadership is people who are responsible for the result, whatever that result is. If it goes wrong, it's on me. Mea culpa, it's on me. If it goes right, actually, it's us. We did that. We did good, guys. There's a lovely phrase that Roger Courtney, who founded one of the special force units over here in the 40s, said. He said he's not looking for, it was a male environment, he's not looking for men with discipline. He's looking for men with self-discipline.
Yeah.
And I think that distinction is incredibly important. So in answer to your question, that leaders create leaders, that distributed leadership model, it gets called empowerment, and no one quite knows what that means in a way. But that idea really that one of the key roles of leaders is to create other leaders. And if you take a mission command model, another military model, the leader's job is to set the end state, the impact that we want to have, the vision, the what and the why. And then hand it over to the subordinates to figure out the how, to be responsive to the conditions on the front line. Militarily, they talk about the strategic corporal, the thinking soldier. I think that principle absolutely applies to a highly energized, highly responsive, highly agile organization in which people know what's required, they know the end state, they're committed to delivering it, they're trusted to make good decisions, they have a sense of autonomy, they get to be better and grow as human beings and as leaders. That empowerment model, if you like, creating the dirt in which people can grow. Culture, we talked about the culture word. Cicero back in Rome really coined the phrase or made the distinction that the culture is really creating the conditions for people to grow, for people to develop, to cultivate. So leadership is about cultivating the conditions in which other human beings grow and perform at their best. That's what culture is, or a good culture is. And I just one thing actually on culture, because I think you said, it almost becomes wallpaper, the phrase culture. And I think that's right. It doesn't mean it's no less important. I like the phrase environment because it just shifts the game a little bit. And it tends to be the word that's used within elite teams. How can we create a high performance environment? The other phrase or the other word I like to use is climate. And climate is slightly different from culture. You can have a great culture if you want. Let's say a school might have a great culture, but what really matters to the students is the climate in the classroom. And that's defined by the humans in that room. And particularly in a sort of Me Too era, an era that talks a lot about, and rightly, about diversity and inclusion and rebalancing power structures. That creating a climate, the right climate, a climate in which things grow, if you like, or people grow, I think is absolutely got to be, the right place to be and to be standing right now. Psychological safety, is vital for people to function to their full ability. Creating giving voice to people, allowing people to bring themselves to the task is a climatic thing. And so I'm really interested in exploring that idea of, how do we create the climate around ourselves? And that comes to personal leadership. And it really begins with leading from within. You have to have awareness. You have to have the sensibility or be prepared to challenge yourself. And, I would argue, and the All Blacks is a good example of this, is that the transformation within the All Blacks environment, I don't think would have been possible without the transformation of the people at the top. Graham Henry, the then coach, was a headmaster. I think he'd be the first to admit he was pretty command and control. Lovely man, but it was his way or the highway for a long time. And over the course of his career, as he matured, as he learned, he understood that actually it was not about him being in charge. It was him kind of charging his followers, if you like, and giving them a charge, an energetic transfer from one to the other. So, he turned it upside down in a way, and that personal transformation, I think, enabled the possibility, with a lot of input from other people, for the team to go from quite a hierarchical group filled with dysfunction into one that was, genuinely inclusive. And I'd go even further. I think that, that team and many other teams that I've worked with really at the top level are really fueled by love and, brotherhood, fraternity, sisterhood, connection, a sense of caring for each other, playing for each other. And that goes as far back as you want. That goes back to the Spartan shield. The idea the Spartans would fight with their right hand and their short sword. And if they lost that in battle, that wasn't a problem. But the shield was for their mates. And again, in the military, they say you don't fight for, queen and country. You fight for the bloke in the foxhole beside you.
Yeah.
So creating that kind of environment, that kind of climate, if you like, in which people grow and are able, feel free to play at their best. They're free of fear. That's, it's, punished. If there is punishment, it's for sins of omission. It's for not going for it rather than for going for it, for having a go. It creates an entirely different dynamic within a group, one that is, risk averse versus one that is entrepreneurial and enterprising.
Yeah.
And so that climate, and that particularly that personal climate that everybody can impact on those around them, I think is really where a spotlight deserves and needs to be shone in a way, because culture can be a very abstract set of values written on a wall or, a mission statement on a website. And if that's not reflected, in a school sense, in the classroom or in a meeting room or in a team, then culture means nothing.
Yeah. It's just
and
words
so
on a wall.
The climate?
Yeah.
It's just words on a wall.
Yeah.
And
it's powerful.
it's taking the walls from the words from the wall and getting them on the floor, getting those values and living them out loud, creating the space for people to be the best that they can be, being a resource for people to grow and develop, has got to be the I believe and I've seen is the pinnacle really of leadership.
Yeah.
It's it is being the climate that allows that cultivated culture to grow human beings and beyond just professionally. There's an anthropological kind of thing that leaders tend to have a few gray hairs or be moving in that general direction. Anthropologically, as soon as we start to kind of get near our 40s on one side or the other, that tends to be when that's a tribal elder.
Yeah.
And what's the role of a tribal elder is to hand over the wisdom of the tribe, train up the next generation, be a protector, create the environments in which the capacity and the capability of that tribe, if you like, of that group, can develop for the good of all.
Yeah.
So I think there's something very fundamental, hardwired, it's not a phrase I like, but something anthropological, evolutionary in a sense, about that kind of mode of looking or model of leadership. Anyway, long answer to a short question.
No, but James, I think there's a few words you said in there that really struck me, because I read the book and I've loved that section on pass the ball. But you also said something there in that conversation that struck me: leaders create leaders. And that's even at the front line, because I think a lot of the time you were talking there so much about creating leadership and capability in your front line, that empowerment, that accountability, that motivation, that drive to support your mate beside you. That is basically it. That creates bottom up. That creates that bottom up energy.
Agility, flexibility, and reality too. How many initiatives don't work because the people who are supposed to implement them just go, "This is crazy.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
This is the next fad.
Bad idea."
Yeah,
this is the latest bad idea. The joke I made, it's a great team on paper, but they have to play on grass.
Yeah.
And how it's, life's not a PowerPoint presentation. It may look really good, but actually somebody has to execute this. It's better to empower or trust or create a process in which those having to deal with frontline issues are able to respond to frontline issues.
Yeah.
And that's leadership. That's kind of contextual leadership on the spot, on the front line where it matters, or in the back office where it matters. It doesn't really matter where it exists. And
could be the White House or anywhere.
There's a phrase around sport, a CEO in every position. Decision makers at and people are decision, and they're either making a decision to engage or not engage. And how many customers get lost at a kind of a retail level, if you like, because through inflexibility.
Yeah.
So I bought a pair of shoes actually a little while ago from a company connected to Prada, Church's shoes. Somebody in any branch has a direct line to the CEO.
Yeah,
right.
Well.
The hierarchy there it exists clearly. There are roles and responsibilities, but if there is a problem, there's just there are hotel groups that provide kind of a discretionary spending sum just to solve your guests' problems, and that level of small, and that they actually spend less. What they found is they spend less on those discretionary budgets, but the idea that you have the power, that you are trusted, that you are a problem solver, that it's customer facing or guest facing, and that's a huge priority, and we back you to make good decisions. That's gold.
Yeah, that is massive. Yeah, and that is creating leaders at the front line.
Right at the front line. And I think anyone who thinks, well, leadership is me and those other guys and girls who have come up with me and we're the brains trust and we know everything, that's a very blinkered and narrow approach to the idea of leadership. It's very transactional, it's very hierarchical, and it's not very effective. It's really usually pretty poor leadership. You need extraordinarily powerful processes in place to replicate something even near to the human dimension, the human ability to to respond, to play the ball, to take the rugby metaphor.
Yeah.
To play the game, to play the ball as it falls in front of you. So I think that's a vital part of the paradigm, if you like. Or the model is getting it to every level. And if I can just talk for a moment about on a military, I think one of the things in large organizations is there are very few recognized models. So people might say, let's create an empowerment culture. What does that mean? I mean, empowerment is one of those pink and fluffy words anyway now that becomes wallpaper. But what does that mean? How do you do that? And most people go, well, empowerment is, I don't know. I'm going to kind of ask them what they think occasionally. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there are no methods. There's no methodology. The military use a thing called mission command, which is, if you break down the key elements, it's about selecting the right people. It's about having the right DNA. It's about training them right. It's about resourcing them right, giving them that 50 quid they can, or $50 they can spend on a bunch of flowers to say sorry, or whatever it is. And it's about communicating in a certain way. And it's about communicating by setting the what and the why, the big picture, the intent, what's called the commander's intent, and then asking them how they're going to do it. Your subordinates, what do you reckon?
Yeah.
How should we do this? Because empowerment, is, people executing a plan they've been a part of making, really.
Yeah.
And then what in Mission Command gets called the sort of directed telescope. You don't micromanage. You just look at some small moments here and there. You keep an eye on things, but you don't kind of get right into the micromanagement, because otherwise you take away all of that autonomy that you've created. And self-determination theory out of Australia, talks about autonomy or mastery, autonomy and relatedness. Generally in a humanistic stance, good people want to be good at what they do. They want to achieve mastery. There's a sort of sense of self-determination that's fundamental to that. They want to do it on their own terms. They want autonomy. No one wants to be micromanaged. No one wants to go against their own values now more than ever.
Yeah.
They want relatedness. They want to be connected with the people they work for a cause that matters. So if you can create that within your environments and empower them, say, guys, what do you reckon? You're the guys at the front line. You tell us. And if we think that this holds together, we will resource it and we will make it happen. I mean, that's the kind of leadership you want. You don't want it all decided in a nice, on the 17th floor of a skyscraper with nice cushy seats and an expensive Italian table and everyone sitting around with PowerPoints deciding just what's going to happen at the front line. That never worked.
Yeah.
It's an organ transplant. The body's going to reject it.
Yeah. And like you said, it's won or lost on the grass. And so really that's where it counts. So it's won or lost on the grass. That is what really counts. We're going to conclude episode 1 at this point and come back next week for part 2 on what the All Blacks can teach us about the business of life. Join us next week for episode 48 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where we'll delve into this amazing story further. Thanks again, James. Bye for now.